Hey guys, it's BlockchainBrad, and today we're talking about Origo. Yes, that's right, it's a blockchain design and architecture that many of you don't know about yet. And to explain this further, we have Baron Gong. Baron is a core member of the team and is here tonight to explain this further. Thank you very much, Baron.
Hi, hi guys. This is Baron.
So obviously, Baron, we're talking about Origo tonight, and the slogan goes as the Scalable Privacy Preserving Platform for Decentralized Applications, or perhaps a better known acronym is PAPS. There's a lot to learn, a lot to explore. I've read your white paper thoroughly. It says that you are trying to unlock possibilities. So can you tell us a bit about yourself, Baron, and how you're planning to unlock that as a key member of this team?
Sure. I personally come from a math background, so I used to be one of the outstanding winner of ICM,
Hmm.
which stands for Interdiscipline Contest of Modeling. And then I went after college in the States. I went back to China and started my first company. And then I sold the company in 2015, and really, since that time, I really started to dig into the blockchain space.
Hmm.
And at that time, there wasn't many very cool projects out there. A lot of people are very suspicious as well.
Hmm.
Not very good engineers really jumped in. If you look at some projects from that year, their code base is pretty rusty.
Hmm.
But then gradually, I mean, 2016 and 2017, we see the boom with the price increase of Bitcoin, and then people started paying attention. There was a lot of very good projects.
Sure, sure, and
Personally,
I can appreciate that as well, Baron. And I've read through your qualifications; it's quite impressive. You have a master's in management science and also in engineering. Whereabouts did you graduate from? And can you tell us a bit about your academic background?
yeah, sure. I took my master's degree in Colombia,
Hmm.
and then just jumped into the my first startup that was on data reporting stuff for companies on social responsibility reports.
Right.
Basically, all company have a lot of like non-financial data, and we did a SaaS level enterprise solution platform for them.
I
Yeah.
see. So you've been applying your knowledge from that degree, and I noticed in your information provided on your website that you've actually been involved in an RMB fund where you've been involved in more than $700 million worth of assets. Can you tell us a bit about that
Mhm.
management role and how that relates to your degree?
Yeah, sure. That was somewhere in 2014, 2015.
Hmm.
That after I was going to sell my last company, the deal was done already. And then I joined a group of friends, basically their family office, rich kids in China.
Hmm.
They started paying attention in fintech
Hmm.
space. Yeah, we started to explore like fintech opportunities, mostly in pre-A or A round, looking at companies with different potentials in online lending or
Hmm.
online insurance, a lot of the supply chain financing. At that time, I really, yeah, got a lot of exposure to a lot of good CEOs in China.
Hmm.
We've invested in a couple projects. Yeah, it's pretty good.
I see. So clearly, you're quite connected in China, certainly at the higher echelon of society, with sheer financial connections you have, and no doubt you've moved across into the decentralized marketplace. If we could now explore Origo itself, obviously, few people at the moment know about this plan. Can you tell us essentially what it is in a nutshell, and then we'll explore some of the claims that you're making.
Yeah, sure. So our inspiration of Origo is really simple.
Hmm.
As we see a lot of the new blockchain projects, although they claim as Ethereum killer, right?
Hmm.
A lot of them focus on like scalability part. But then if you look at the privacy part on smart contract, very few have done any work on that. And then we just dig into why is that the case? If you look at other private projects like Monero and Zcash or Dash, they're
Hmm.
pretty good projects, top 20 in the world. But they're more like UTXO based model, more focused on privacy for transaction. But then a smart contract is also very important for blockchain to be used by many real world applications. So yeah, that's why we actually focused on this track.
I
saying
see.
that why don't we create some privacy for a smart contract?
I see. So essentially,
Uh,
that is your premise. Having read through your white paper, clearly
mhm.
in that first 39 pages, the big focus really is trying to provide privacy for the smart contract and doing it with various technologies we'll explore deeply today. But I wanted to talk to you now about some of the claims you've made. And one of them is that you're saying that privacy is dying online, and as a result, you're saying that you are the cure for privacy. Can you tell us exactly how you can make that claim?
Yeah, sure. I recently wrote an article on Medium about GDPR thing.
Hmm.
That I will start that from there as an example. So in GDPR, that the law states that if a user requires in any company to delete his or her information, that company must do that. But then if you think about the case in many of the internet companies or centralized companies, uh,
Sorry, I think we lost you for a moment
hello,
there.
yeah, yeah,
Sorry.
sure.
Sorry, go ahead.
It's hard to it's hard to prove because once your data is stored in their like centralized servers, like they have a group of servers, right?
Hmm.
It's really hard for them to prove that. They can't just show that, hey, look at my server. I have to delete that. It's not possible for them to do that, right?
Hmm.
So what we claim is that at Origo network, a lot of the applications you use will be not touching any of your personal data itself directly. Rather, we're touching some sort of computational proof of your data.
Right.
So basically, what you store on chain is not your data itself,
Hmm.
but some sort of zero-knowledge proof form of your data on chain. I think that's the higher level understanding of our technology.
So,
You're not touching any of the data itself, but then you're still using that data because you have to use data to do some sort of applications, right?
right.
Calculations, computations, and something like that.
Sure. So in that respect, obviously you're talking about on-chain data and not accessing the entirety of it. But are you doing so in such a way that it's on off-chain?
I mean, data in our network, we basically have the flexibility for users to choose. So one option, as I mentioned, is that you don't have to store any data on chain.
Hmm.
Basically, you store your personal data off chain. It doesn't have to be connected to internet.
Hmm.
But then, if you want to use any applications on chain, any functions on chain, you just do some sort of the zero knowledge proof computation that we prepare a lot of tools for you. That's one possibility. But then there are other cases that the user does want to store the data on chain
Hmm.
because, for example, they're using 10 applications at the same time at our network.
Right.
So they want to save the 9 other times to do
Hmm.
this again, right?
Right.
So they want to store the on chain. So how do we make sure that the kind of things like GDPR that doesn't happen in the future? So I mean, that's really the magic of blockchain that deleting an account can be reached a consensus
Hmm.
through blockchain,
And we will
which
talk
is not
about.
possible in centralized companies. I mean, every node can basically agree that yeah, we've already deleted your account.
Sure. And we will talk about your consensus later because it is quite detailed and it's separated into different areas. But I wanted to also talk to you about, once again, you referenced the zero knowledge proofs. And obviously they are replete in other designs as well. We see them certainly in Zcash, as you mentioned, and certainly some of the key architects behind it lead projects like Zcash. So we'll discuss that later as competitors, perhaps potentially. But I also wanted to ask you about the claim of you being the world's first decentralized application platform that protects your privacy. Now that's a really big claim, Baron. You're suggesting that you're the first one to really properly protect privacy as a full and robust platform. How can you make that claim, and how can you back it up?
Well, yes, as I mentioned previously, the Zcash people, the Monero people, their privacy is on transaction level, meaning they're hiding basically three things. So the sender address, the receiver address, and then the transaction amount. Transaction is a very simple kind of application,
Hmm.
but then in real world there are a lot of more sophisticated applications. Say you're doing paychecks online, you're doing supply chain contracts online, you're doing banking online. I mean, there are a lot of contracts online.
Mm.
And there are some very sensitive details of the data. For example, your contract input, output, your personal ID information, your payment information, your proof of funds. Those are very critical information. And there's no really a good way that Zcash or Monero architecture right now can support that. I'm not
Right.
saying it's impossible in the future.
Hmm.
It's just now, right now. I mean, changing from a UTXO based model to account based model like us,
Hmm.
I mean, requires restructuring. I mean, restructuring is just like starting a new project.
Okay, so you're saying you're an
Um,
accounts model. So is it correct in saying that you know of no other platform in any way? You've mentioned Monero and Zcash, sure, but are there no others to your knowledge that are actually functioning as platforms that facilitate with smart contracts to operate in this way for privacy protections?
Not right now. We're just saying not right now, but we're very happy to see more in the future because with the GDPR thing, we see more and more projects and good teams in the blockchain space starting to explore that. It's a very large space.
Hmm.
Certainly, we wouldn't be the only one in there. We like to have like friends and allies together develop this space.
Sure. Now, obviously, Baron, there are some serious pain points that you're trying to address, and that we find that in most cases when we see new and emergent blockchain designs and startups. What are the key problems that you foresaw, and what are the specific problems that you want to address through this?
Yeah, technology-wise, I mean, there are two parts of two parts of the issues we're going to see in the future. One is zero-knowledge proof is not a very easy tool for like normal developers.
Hmm.
I mean, even the best developers have hard time understanding a lot of the zero knowledge proof stuff. For example, like circuits. I mean, normal engineers probably haven't seen what a circuit looks like. It has like several thousands of gates
Hmm.
in the code itself, and it's really hard to see or to even to code. I think that's one key issue. Basically, what we do is that we're trying to build a tool chain.
Hmm.
Just make it as easy as possible for future developers to understand what is zero-knowledge proof, and then how they can actually convert their high-level programming language into these kind of zero-knowledge proof circuits that we're building.
Hmm.
Yeah, we are building a compiler based on that. It should be a very, very easy for like just any regular engineers who's willing to learn a little bit about zero-knowledge proof.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think that's number one. And then the second thing is really the cost. I mean, no blockchain has really brought so much heavy cryptography primitives to the blockchain, which will give them like two additional costs. One is more storage online, and then is costing more gas fees.
Hmm.
So we also have a small team working on that part. As we stated on our website, that we have this scalability tailored for privacy team
Hmm.
that's working on some of the, like I said, additional cost resolving issues
I see.
for zero proof. Yeah.
I see. So you focused on trying to address some of the previous issues that you've seen emergent with the zero knowledge proofs, and you want to. And I noticed in your white paper you're talking about interactive ones to really develop that concept. But I wanted to also now talk about essentially the virtual machine. Talk us through that. How long did it take you to build? What's involved in what you do have in terms of code for the virtual machine, and what are you planning to do with that in terms of move it into the global space?
Yeah, sure. The virtual machine part, we have just started working on that coding this month.
Hmm.
We should see more progress in the coming month or two.
You mentioned it started this month. Virtual machines are quite complex by nature, so often in many instances we see months and months of pre-design and pre-development in terms of even code. So how long do you think it's going to take for you to build out your virtual machine alone?
Well, we've actually spent almost like 4 months before this. I mean, we started the project started earlier this year in January.
Hmm.
Yeah, we started looking at virtual machine stuff earlier this year as well. We did some preparation work.
Hmm.
I can't really guarantee you an exact amount of time right now, but
Hmm.
we'll see that we have done enough preparation to make it as soon as possible.
Right, okay. Now, with regard to sharding as one of your key aspects of your tech, obviously that's a key component to your design, intended for horizontal scaling, no doubt. Talk us through the different sharding you have with your computation and your state sharding.
Yes, I mean, we just mentioned briefly over there. I mean, the focus of our projects is not really sharding. But then, I mean, we did some research on the sharding solutions about all the projects. You name it, Zilliqa, a lot of out there. What we see is that there's not. We do see a lot of difficulties coming along the way. But the computational sharding is something that we can definitely explore in terms of reducing the zero-knowledge proof additional cost on blockchain.
Okay.
I think we see the problem more from that side rather than I mean, for other projects, they see the problem more from how much you improve TPS. It's not our case.
Right, so obviously it's outlined in your white paper about those two aspects of sharding, but what you're saying is it's not a focus of Origo itself, so that's quite interesting that you do say, given that it's outlined in your white paper. Let's move now across to, again, the interactive aspect of the ZKP, in terms of the interactive aspect of zero-knowledge proofs. Tell us a bit more about the smart contracts, how you're trying to utilize this model of the zero knowledge proofs for smart contracts, and more specifically the interactive aspect.
Yeah, sure. I mean, well, in normal Solidity Ethereum like smart contract, you basically have a piece of code writing all these things you want to write in an application or like a normal contract. And in the code itself, it has something like input and output, right?
Right.
Usually, you want to use a smart contract because you want to calculate something from the input. You don't just take the input as the output directly. And that's really the magic of a smart contract, which we believe code is law. Yeah, we want to have certain conditions met, and then certain things. We'll make sure that certain things happen after the smart contract in terms of execution. So what we do is that we implement. I mean, we encrypt the input data, and then how do we calculate the data without decrypt the data itself, right? Then we just encrypt the data and use the encryption into our zero-knowledge proof, and then we do the zero-knowledge proof computation. And then after that, we send back to the contract itself another result. That's also in the form of zero-knowledge proof.
I see.
So in that way, basically, you're not decrypting any data itself. It's just everything is packed in zero-knowledge proof in that proof format. You have a proving key, you have a verification key. Proving is done off-chain, but then verification is done on-chain.
Right.
Everyone has a verification key on-chain so that everyone can verify that this proof is done correctly. Yeah, I think that's just how we're going to do that.
Right. Now, you mentioned before about Ethereum, and you specifically mentioned the code itself, the language in which Ethereum is built on, Solidity, it's known as. Now, my understanding is that Origo is a smart contract operation that's going to be using solely and wholly Solidity, and also it's developed from Ethereum rather than from, for example, BTC or other different platforms. Now, can we explore that a bit further? Are you going to run on that language specifically of Solidity?
In the long term, no.
Okay.
Our plan is to support as many smart contract languages as possible.
Short term?
Short term, yeah, for the POC stuff, for the lighter version of testnet, we'll probably go with the Solidity because that's where most of the developers are familiar with in terms of smart contract coding.
Sure.
Why not?
Sure. Now, do you see that as a risk at all, given that there are so many emergent platforms coming, and because Solidity is a platform-specific language? Do you see that as a boon or as something that's in some ways a barrier?
Well, we see both actually. I mean, it's really in our case, it's really the challenge of compiler. So when your compiler can support converting multiple different languages into zero-knowledge proof circuits, that'd be very cool. Basically, we're supporting a lot of projects, a lot of the coding languages out there, but that's gonna take a while.
Okay.
I mean, it's not easy, and no one else has ever done anything like this in the past.
So,
Yeah, just give us some time and we'll be there.
sure. So ERC 21st also is the plan. Now, one of the things I want to talk to you about is some of the tech risks that I perceived or wrote down having read your white paper. One of them was with regard to the verifications that you just mentioned, in that you have these off-chain verifications designed in order to minimize, but potentially by doing so they could minimize performance. And it's mentioned actually in your white paper of that concern. So can you tell us what you're doing to address the risks of a less performant operation because you're moving in the off-chain area for verifications?
Well, actually, we mentioned that off-chain part is more on computation. All the
Mm-hmm.
verification is actually done on-chain.
Right.
The reason we're outsourcing computation off-chain is because, as I mentioned, the additional cost is huge for zero-knowledge proof.
Mm-hmm.
Computation itself is very different from normal computation.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are some risk of doing off-chain computation in terms of data leak. We mentioned that as well in the white paper.
Yes, you
Basically,
did.
we're thinking about enforcing two ways, and that's just the magic of a blockchain again.
Mm-hmm.
One is more the economic side. Basically, whoever wants to run this competition off-chain, they're required to have a deposit system. So
Mm-hmm.
whatever they do, like if they abort the competition or they potentially leak any information, the deposit will be gone.
I see.
And that deposit is usually proportional to the amount of the smart contract.
Right.
So that's more on the economic punishment side.
Mm-hmm.
It's similar like the Casper idea that Ethereum is building right now, right?
Right.
I mean, the high level idea is very similar. How do you prevent people from doing something bad? Make a
Sure.
deposit, right?
Sure.
That's number one. And then we also encouraging people to run off-chain computation on trusted execution environments like Intel SGX.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a difference of running Intel JS on Origo network than running SGX on other projects.
Sure.
Because basically we're just requiring them to run that for the sake of not enabling them to access some of the information in that machine, right?
Right.
But then we're not trusting any of the computational result because the computational result is still verified by zero-knowledge proof, as in our case.
Right.
A lot of the problem we see with SGX is that computational result is not verifiable. The only way you can verify that is to do a remote attestation back to Intel.
Right.
But then by combining zero-knowledge proof and Intel SGX, basically we solve this verification problem while not relying too heavily on any single kind of hardware.
I see.
In general, we support normal hardwares in general, the whole network.
Right, and it's interesting to note you explained that some of the concerns you had were computation, given that you're moving some of that off-chain. But just to quote from something from your white paper, it does actually say that off-chain verifications could minimize on-chain performance. And so there is this aspect, I did want to broach with you once again, if there are any concerns with the mode in which you are verifying your data, because clearly there are some statements made in your white paper that do suggest or infer that there is performance concerns with some of the approaches you're taking.
Yes. I think really our philosophy of design in terms of infrastructure is about freedom.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, we allow users to choose between security and performance.
Right.
In a lot of the cases, security and performance are not something you can get at the same time. Right. Basically, you have two options. If you choose performance over security, will give you option 1. And then if you choose security over performance, we'll give you option 2.
Right.
And those designs are very compatible in our infrastructure right now. Mm-hmm. We think it's just more suitable for future use cases.
Right. Well, thank you for explaining that. Now, if we could talk about your consensus as well. Now, one of the risks posed potentially is your hybrid design. And I say this because you operate on 2 different chain levels with regard to your transactional chain and also your identity chain. So we're talking about your DBFT or your delegated Byzantine fault tolerance and also your POW and your POS model. I ask you because often we've seen the failings of hybridized designs previously, and also there's different intentions for each of those different mechanisms. So can you talk us through that and how you can ensure that this hybrid can actually work?
Yeah, I mean, consensus, before I'm stating anything, consensus is something that almost every project keeps changing all the time because right now the consensus space is now very developed
Right.
compared to other parts of the technology,
Mm-hmm.
blockchain in general.
Right.
And there are literally new consensus algorithm coming out every day.
Right.
Wouldn't make a final decision right now.
Okay.
It's not final because I mean, consensus is something that you have to finalize before your mainnet.
Mm.
So that gives us some time to actually explore like new consensus mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
For right now, our idea is in the high level like Casper.
Sure.
Uh, yeah, as I mentioned, it's basically deposit punished based system.
Mm-hmm.
It's more leaning towards POS, but
Mm-hmm.
then even Ethereum hasn't really achieved that.
Right.
There are a lot of uncertainties about that as well.
Mm.
So
Well,
a safe.
I do appreciate your transparency about that, in that you haven't necessarily secured a specific algorithm yet for your consensus. And you also
Mhm.
mentioned, you have a strong reliance on Ethereum, given that you keep referencing Casper, and it's also articulated in your white paper. So clearly there's a strong synergy between yourselves and Ethereum in that respect. Do you have a good relationship with Vitalik?
Not directly. I
Right.
mean,
So
yeah,
do
we've
you work
seen
with
him a
the
lot of
team?
time in China.
Okay. Do you work with the team at all, with Ethereum or the Ethereum Enterprise Alliance in any way, so that, because clearly I see a lot of references to Ethereum.
Yeah, there is a Ethereum Foundation backed project called Socrates.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically doing zk strikes on Ethereum
Mm-hmm.
by converting Solidity into zk strikes.
Okay.
Yeah, we are working with that team. Jacob is the head of that team.
Right.
Yeah, we've been working very closely.
I see. Well, that's good to know. Now, if we can talk about, you were talking about those actors, those node actors, with regard to malicious nodes, node failures, network partitioning. How do you sort of address some of the concerns that can happen? Obviously, you mentioned some of the inbuilt facilities with your design, but what specifically are you doing to prevent and preclude these kind of malicious actors or malicious nodes from really breaking down the functionality?
Yeah, sure. I mean, basically, it's two part of the solutions. One is that when you design the network, we try to be as decentralized as possible,
Mm-hmm.
meaning that we're not heavily relying on a certain group of nodes,
Mm-hmm.
or certainly not any single nodes.
Mm-hmm.
So the more nodes we have, theoretically, it could be safer that
Right.
way.
Right.
Because it's very decentralized and no one can actually break down the network.
Mm.
And then, as I mentioned, the economic system we're enforcing in the future is something as well that we want to have this kind of economic hand
Mm-hmm.
behind the network that actually helps people regulate themselves. So malicious party gets punished severely.
Mm-hmm.
Double spending costs like tremendous. Yeah, something like that.
Mm.
It's just basically two parts of the story.
Right, obviously. So obviously, it's interesting you mentioned before that the consensus itself is quite evolutionary in terms of it's not finite, and it's not something that really is maintained by its original status. And we know that from the iterations we've seen from BTC alone. But I did want to refer to you about the Byzantine fault tolerance system, because often we've seen problems with two things. One is a number of nodes, too few nodes in too many blockchains to really be truly decentralized, and also some of the problems in fault tolerance in the Byzantine fault tolerance system. Have you acknowledged those, and how many nodes are you actually planning on starting with?
Frankly speaking, we haven't been that far yet.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think my colleague Frank has some thoughts on that.
Right.
We haven't got a chance to say on that.
Mm-hmm.
But right now, our focus is really on doing the privacy part,
Sure.
coding, and the infrastructure for the coding itself.
Sure.
I think that's our primary concern right now. And then
Mm.
upon finishing that, we'll probably have a better notes a bit better understanding of the question you asked.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much again, for explaining that there's a lot more to come. Now, with regard to your virtual machine, obviously we mentioned that previously with regard to you do have your own. It's based on the WebAssembly or the WASM model, and that's quite a new one that's come forth from the W3C, which is a very respected entity in and of itself. So can you tell us about the new aspects of the new virtual machine models coming, and why you've decided to utilize the WebAssembly in this way?
Yeah, I mean, from a very high level understanding of WebAssembly is that it basically supports a lot more devices.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that it's gonna support like super small phones.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it basically broadens the use range
Mm-hmm.
for a lot of devices. We just think it's very cool to be able to run blockchain stuff or like
Mm-hmm.
even food stuff run on smaller devices rather than just running on like super fast computers, like more virtual machines.
I see.
I think that's basically the very high level reason we chose WebAssembly. Yeah, again, my colleague Frank is working on that right now.
Right. And are you involved in any partnerships with W3C? Because obviously they were some of the key designers of this WASM model.
Not yet. We'll seek more collaborations in the future.
I see. Okay, so let's talk team now. Obviously, there's not a lot of information on your white paper, and certainly not on your website about the whole team that you represent. But there are some key people that I have read through, and there are 6 of them, including yourself. But what was interesting is that you are titling them core contributors. So immediately I was wondering, are you in fact a whole team, or are you people that have simply added in value to Origo itself?
Well, I mean, we got that question a lot as well. I mean, it's easy for us to call ourselves like founders or CEOs, but it's not very blockchain in our way.
Okay.
Yeah, Origo is not like solely owned by us. It's probably started by us. It's probably most of the early work are led by us. But then in the future, everyone is a contributor in the Origo Foundation. So we just think it's kind of cool that to name ourselves just as core contributors. And we are all full time working on this. It's really hard to work part time on such a project with such a large scale.
And Baron, I really appreciate you mentioning the full-time aspect, because I tell you honestly, when people read core contributors, they're not really sure if you are a team. They're not really sure that you are all bound together, working cohesively on a project full-time and trying to really build it out from the basis or from the foundations. So I suppose that's a fair concern that people had, was that we haven't seen these kind of titles of core contributors before.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, we certainly know that before we even think about publishing this. Again, as I said, it's too easy to name yourself as CEOs or team members of that. I think what really matters is not like short-term wandering or uncertainties about this. Gradually, if they see more codes, see more testnets coming out of our Origo network, they understand, wow, these teams are really strong. Right. Working on this like full speed. Yeah, I mean, time will prove.
Sure, and I appreciate
prove as well. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So tech will talk. Now, with regard to the people that are mentioned in your core 6, we're talking about Frank, yourself, Yijia. My apologies if I've pronounced her name wrong, and also Dr. Weiren Liu, and also Hong Chai and Sonia Wang. Now, there's different skill sets, obviously, inbound in those 6 people, highly technical in all aspects or business savvy. Now, are you all working together every day? Are you interacting, or are these people interspersed around the world?
We are dispersed around the world, but we're interacting every day, like from very early morning and then to very late in the night, because basically we're crossing 2 different time zones. Sure. Some folks are very heavily based in California, and then some folks are based in China. Right. Yeah, nobody sleeps basically, because when you try to sleep, another guy wakes up and calls you to solve some problem. Yeah, we're very decentralized team, but yeah, things are getting done.
Right. Now, can I ask you, Baron, as well, how did this team form?
The what?
How did this team come about? How did it come to exist?
Yeah, it's. I mean, first it's basically me, Frank, Ija,
Hmm.
that we had this idea about the privacy part of smart contract, and then we do understand that even though we have very strong engineering background, Frank is one of the best architect in our Pinterest, and Ija worked on a lot of Google projects as well.
Hmm.
Yeah, we do see ourselves as solid engineers, but then we do need someone in cryptography. That's why we approached Dr. Liu. He's probably one of the most important influencer
Hmm.
in China in terms of cryptography. He has about 15K followers on cryptography.
Wow.
Uh, well, which is hard to believe because
Mm,
not many people know about cryptography,
that's
right?
right.
And he has people followers, just cryptographies.
Right. And
Um,
sorry, we lost you for a
yeah, I
moment
mean,
there.
then we approached it, and yeah,
Yeah, sorry, we just lost you for a moment. So you're right. Cryptography is not necessarily a sexy topic for many people, and what he's done is made it applicable for so many. To reach 15,000 is quite
yes,
exceptional.
he's amazing. I mean, he's a PhD already. What he did before joining Origo is basically making sure that normal people can understand cryptographies,
Mm.
from undergrad, from high school level,
Sure, that'd be great.
basically.
It'd be great to talk to him in the
Uh,
future because obviously that's a key component of your design. Now, with your tech claims as well, I wanted to ask you. There's some key features you do talk about, and one of them is that you say essentially that you can be publicly you can be available for the public as public transactions, but you also provide confidentiality. You also provide scalability for privacy. So, can we talk about move on from the smart contract because that is essentially the fundamental of your design, but really talk about scalability in that context. What can you do to facilitate the public transactions to be more scalable?
well, again, as we discussed briefly, that computational sharding,
Mm.
a better
But
virtual
in terms of
machines.
numbers, I'm talking about.
In terms of numbers, I mean, right now we have, we do have some numbers internally in terms of public transactions,
Hmm.
but we're not ready to announce that. We're going to probably do that somewhere in the summer.
Mm. How's it
Just
looking though internally, and how confident are you? Given that obviously, Baron, let's be both very honest about this. We've seen all kinds of claims made from all kinds of blockchains and non-blockchain platforms, all the way up to 1 billion transactions per second. And some of them are ridiculous, and some of them perhaps are founded on real potentials. So, are you
yeah.
concerned, quite sincerely, that there are capacities already built into certain projects right now to address scalability quite sufficiently?
Well, I would say that we're not aiming or targeting anything like a million TPS, right?
Sure.
It doesn't make sense to
Okay.
make that kind of uh, uh, things for us. I mean,
Mm.
our focus is still privacy. But I would say is that right now what we have is something certainly very functional, very effective,
Right.
and compared to a lot of the very well-known like scalability projects out there,
Mm.
new projects. I would say it's roughly the same.
Hmm.
Might be a little bit slower, but then it shouldn't be at the same level.
Right. And as you build out into your own platform, do you anticipate that the scalability aspects of your design will become more important then?
Yeah, I mean, it will become more important somewhere approaching the minute. But
Hmm.
right now, we're just focusing on the privacy part.
Sure, sure, I appreciate that. Now, I wanted to talk to you about a tough topic, and that's with regard to your code. My understanding right now is the majority of your code is private and not accessible to the public. Is that correct?
Every bit of that is private right now.
Okay, so every bit. So for those who are wondering where the code is, it's not accessible. But I did want to ask you this: are you concerned in any way about your code?
Well, I mean, in terms of the coding progress, we're working very well in terms of timeline,
Hmm.
as promised in the white paper.
Hmm.
We will probably give out some screenshots of our code base,
Hmm.
and or even some detailed screenshots of some certain part of a code.
Right.
I'm happy to give that to you as well. I
Sure.
mean, to just help public understand the kind of things we're building right now. The reason I want to keep it private for now is that, as you see, it's still early project. We don't want to see a lot of malicious competitors or scammy behaviors behind that.
Right.
So we want to just keep it pure. Give us some like quiet time coding. We join that kind of time, and then when we're ready, we're going to open source before December. Yeah.
I see. So you're going to open source the code on the GitHub. So thank you for explaining that. But I want to ask you directly as well, Baron. Obviously, you've alluded to appropriating code itself from other people in the space who can technically take your open source data and utilize it for their own ends. Now, is there any aspect of your code at all whereby it has been appropriated from another source, or is this all your authentic and original code?
It's not 100%. I mean, we have a lot of codes. It's really hard to say like one for all solutions, right?
Sure.
We have quite a few repos.
Right.
Certainly. Yeah. I mean, you learn something from the others. Why not?
Sure.
And then a lot of things you have to build from your own, from scratch. And you have to.
Right.
It's just basically about the programming.
I see. So it's a mix of different things. Now a really tough topic. It's certainly not outlined in your white paper, and that's your ICO plans or your tokenomics as well. Can we first talk about ICO? Are you planning on doing one?
Well, right now the answer is not certain, but we do see, we do have a concrete plan for community engagement.
Right.
Not certain. It's more on legal issues. We're still waiting for our lawyers to reply formally.
Sure.
And how we should structure that. But for sure, we'll have a part of the tokens that goes to the community. It's just a matter of how.
I see.
I mean, there are a lot of forms that just doing public sales, right? Like doing bounties or doing airdrops. I mean, there are a lot of things you can imagine.
Sure. So the method.
We'll see how lawyers respond, and then we can proceed from there.
Right. So the method in which people can access the token has not been decided. Can we talk about the token itself in terms of?
But I mean, having said that, we are going to start a whitelisting program on June the 21st.
Okay.
Because I mean, either way, I mean, either it's bounty or airdrop or it's public sale. I mean. The prerequisite is still whitelisting, so we'll start whitelisting anyways pretty soon this week.
I see. So June 21st, you heard it from Baron, there is going to be some sort of availability via a whitelist of some kind, and it is pre-planned to do so. But can we talk now about the token itself in terms of, is this going to be recognized as a security? Is this going to be recognized as a utility? And can you talk to that with regard to the SEC?
Yeah. Well, the things that our token design is very similar as Ethereum's gas fee. It's basically a function as a fuel to the network.
Okay.
So if you want to verification, validation, zero-knowledge proof competition, it's basically a gas fee.
I see.
So Origo token is also a gas fee. So we do not see any potential of that token becoming a security token.
Right.
Because as you know, the SEC has recently acknowledged that Ethereum is not a security token as well. We don't see a reason why we should be a security token. So it's totally a utility token. We have not had any direct conversation with SEC yet.
Right.
We're going to exclude U.S. citizens from the community engagement part for now. I mean, not forever, just for now. It's just more for legal issues as well.
Sure.
But once we see more clear regulation from SEC, we'll open up that door again.
I see. Well, thank you again for your transparency. Now, I want to talk to you about the metric design in terms of private sale. Now, my understanding is you have already gone through much of your private sale, if not all of it, and you've had serious strategic investors from the outset. How much of all of your token structure or of your model is allocated to the private sale?
We actually have a part for pre-sale. So basically, it's private sale and the community engagement part I mentioned. So together, that's going to be 30%. And in terms of private sale, we've done that in the last month in May.
Sure. And how much was allocated for that private sale? As you said, how much in total for the whole process of private to pre?
You mean for private?
For private and pre combined, how much have you allocated for that whole percentage of your?
Oh yeah. The hard cap is gonna be 30 million US dollars.
Okay, so your hard cap's 30 million. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Something that we're seeing more and more of as these caps are reduced, for whatever reason that be, we're seeing that certainly happen. Now, with regard to your lockups, can you tell us a bit about that with regard to your team and with regard to all those people who you could, for want of no other better word, because it's just simply a fact, these people perceive it as an investment from the outset. Whether or not it be a utility, which you're clearly saying it is, people invest early for the reason of, investment, essentially, initially. So what lockup provisions have you provided for the team, and what is the case for those who have acted early in your utility?
Well, I mean, it's very simple for the team. We have 15 of the total tokens reserved for the team. It's vesting in 3 years with a 6-month cliff.
Okay.
Uh,
And what do you mean? Can we just
yeah,
can we just
so it's
clarify that? What do you
straightforward.
what do
And
you
then
mean? Sorry to interrupt, but what do you mean by the 6-month cliff? What's that referring to?
6 month meaning that team is not getting any token in the first 6 months.
Right. So they access some after 6 months.
Yes.
Why did you do that so early?
Well, I mean, it's just because a lot of most of our private investors gets tokens before that.
hmm
Yeah, we just want to make sure that they get tokens first.
Okay. So we're talking about private investors. Do some of these private investors get them immediately, or some of their proportion of their investment immediately as an unlocked token?
Nope.
Okay. So no unlocked
So,
immediately.
yeah, no one's unlocked immediately. The average between, I mean, it really varies because, I mean, different values of private investors, which is usually the case. But the average is between 6 months and 9 months
Right.
vesting schedule for the private investors.
Right, and you obviously did that because you want to try and sustain, interest in the project itself, rather than just see these typical pump and dump outcomes.
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, if you look at, we have announced 5 of them, the strategic investors. We're going to announce like 10 more, 15 more in the coming week.
Sure.
We have a lot of very good institutional investors. Typically, their money is from even larger institutional investors as well.
Right.
So they are very long term. Some of them have 7 years of fund, or even 10 years of fund.
Right.
They're not in a rush.
Right. Well, let's talk about them now, actually, Baron. So you're referring to some partners such as FBG, Polychain Capital, Kinetic, and Signum Capital. Now, they are all essentially big name capital firms in the crypto space. So can you tell us a little bit about those that we don't know, perhaps, or ones that are really moving into more mainstream scenarios that are taking you to the next level?
You mean you want me to kind of briefly go over those firms, or?
Oh, well, those firms we can go and study up on, but what can you tell us more about the next phase? Now, obviously, those ones are very reputable, they're very, very respected, but what's in the pipeline for building out this? Because you mentioned that there's more coming. There's 5 more in the next week, actually. So what's to come in terms of building out your partnerships?
Well, I mean, one is that through our various investors, we have a lot. We do have traditional VCs invested as well.
Right.
Like the number one VC in China, Jane Fund.
Okay.
The best, yeah, as well. We have some other VC funds in different parts of the world. Their portfolio companies are a lot. I mean, basically, Jane Fund has something like 600, 700 portfolio companies all over the world, and some others have 300, 400. Yeah, I mean, their portfolio companies are really, especially in fintech and healthcare, are really, it's going to be our first group of partners in the future. I think that's number one. And then my personal connections in China, and also, as you see from other team members, Chai Hong and also Sonia Wang, they're very experienced people in the space in terms of BD.
Right.
Each of them has more than 10 years of BD experience in major internet companies in China. They have a lot of connections.
Right, and obviously those connections are imperative when you're building out something like this. As I said, the standard of the current investors that you do have at the strategic level are very strong. But let's talk now about those that can potentially facilitate with more interconnections with decentralized startups. Are you moving in the direction of discussing in any way with any other blockchain or innovative technology such as DLT that potentially could partner and link in the future?
Well, we already have a lot of blockchain level of collaboration, which is gonna be announced somewhere in the summer.
Okay.
We're going to announce that right now. Just keep it private.
Sure.
But I mean, we have some top 50 scalability projects collaborations in China.
Right. That's good to know.
Yeah, we do.
That's
Yeah,
good
we
to
do
know.
have some guy who wants to build like a healthcare dApps on top of us.
Right.
Someone who wants to build online insurance dApps on top of us. Yeah, just keep an eye, and then we'll announce that gradually.
So you have a lot of different businesses knocking on your door, wanting to utilize your service as a privatized smart contract-based platform. So obviously that must be exciting for you, knowing that you're very nascent in the space and it's just an emergent technology right now. Now, in terms of your roadmap, there are some key, I would assume, Latin terms that refer to key developments as you move out from 2008 right through to 2020. Can you talk us through those terms? So you've got Originus, my apologies if I've said that wrong, and then you've got Mediatus, and then you've got Ascendus, and then Infinitus. What are you referring to?
Yeah, I mean, those are just basically Latin words for origin, intermediate, advanced,
and infinite,
something like that.
And infinite.
Yeah, I mean, Origo, the name is from the Latin word of origin as well.
Okay.
Yeah, that's basically what we like as a team.
Sure.
So in terms of the timeline, basically, the testnet we're going to have in December is something functional with the smart contract privacy, and then some sort of private transaction as well.
Right.
But then probably won't be so ready about some of the consensus algorithm because it's basically a testnet. So we're going to have more focus on that after the testnet. So before mainnet, you probably have a better designed ecosystem, economic system, combining together with all these privacy features, as you can see. And after that mainnet, we are going to have a major upgrade on the privacy smart contract as well, because as we discussed briefly, that probably in the beginning we won't support so many languages, right?
Right.
Gradually, we want to support as many languages as possible. Yeah, that's just something out there in the future.
Sure, and obviously as you build out and connect with more, you become more interoperable with other blockchains. You're going to need to do that anyway. So let's talk about now your use cases, Baron, because with every great startup you have to have applicability. There's a long list of different applications you could essentially be used in industries, right from finance to IoT, insurance, AI, and the list goes on. Talk us through use cases and applicability in the context of Origo.
Yeah, sure. Let's take a few examples. Yeah, we do have finished some pseudocoding for some of the use cases, which is not public yet, but it's going to be open sourced somewhere in the future. Let's say if you want to do like online lending on blockchain, it's cool to have this kind of credit scoring on blockchain because once your credit is there, it's always there.
Right.
No one can manipulate that or change that. And then if you write like lending contract in smart contract, you're making sure that your payments, your loans are paid in time, right?
Right.
I mean, there are a lot of advantages of doing blockchain lending, but then the problem is that the lender doesn't want to release their risk evaluation form,
right?
Folders, and then the borrower doesn't want to release his or her financial status, such as income, household, or something like that. So it's really cool to use our technology to combine the both side of the story.
Okay.
At the same time, you're using the magic of blockchain to make online lending faster, better, and more secure, right? But then you want to keep certain sensitive information as private.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean that's just one small example, and it works pretty well for a lot of the condition. We call this as conditioned payments. meaning that you're paying someone under a certain condition, right?
Right.
Say boss is paying your salaries, like salary contracts, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or one business is paying another business in terms of a supply chain contracts.
Right.
I mean, it's really good to have this kind of contracts on chain because you want to make sure you get payments in time.
Right.
And also, if you want to do some business with them, you want to make sure that they have enough funds,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that's just the magic of using smart contract. But then you don't want your colleague or your competitors know the exact amount of
Right.
your settlement between you and your boss or you and your business partner. That's just not, I mean, how the world functions.
Right.
I mean, we don't see that as very appropriate to do that kind of things either. So why don't we combine these two?
And I appreciate your response in terms of giving two examples. But what is interesting is that essentially, because you're working at the smart contract layer, trying to redress some issues there, you really, no doubt, see this as an infinite potential for all cross-industry, cross-application, right through into all fields of arguably business and enterprise. Globally, and really you're not precluded by any potential because you're working at the smart contract to solve some problems. Now, obviously, Baron Gong, it's been really a great privilege to learn more about our Origo, and with every solid interview, we tend to miss aspects. Is there anything that you wanted to address to the public with regard to community, anything with regard to social media access, or anything at all as a final statement, Baron, for the audience to learn more about Origo?
Sure. One more thing is that stay tuned with our coming June 21st whitelisting program. We won't. We promise that we will give back to the community in some form that legally allowed.
Mm-hmm.
So just do the whitelisting. That we'll make sure that everyone gets something out of it.
Right. And Baron, how could people access information through social media? What are the channels?
Our main channel is basically Twitter and Telegram.
Okay.
The best way to do whitelisting is to join our official Telegram group,
okay,
which is at Origo Official Group. It's
okay,
a bit long. We do have something like close to 10,000 people right now.
Mm-hmm.
Without releasing any
information
job or whitelisting. Yeah, so most of the fans, like as you can see in our group, are very technical.
Mm-hmm.
They have a lot of conversations every day talking about the use cases, text stuff like that, which we really enjoy. But
sure.
Then, I mean, for sure in the future there will be more fans looking at whitelisting or token participation in the future. We'll see how that balance.
Absolutely. Well, Baron Gong, with your expertise in the field of engineering and obviously in science, it's been a privilege to speak to you today. You are a core contributor, as you say, which is essentially part of the leading team of Origo. We've unpacked and explored all aspects, I would assume, of Origo itself. And fundamentally, we are reminded through your explanations today that you are all about privacy preserving applications on a platform basis, and we'll be moving in that direction ahead as the PPAP. So thank you very much for your time. We've learned about Origo tonight, and hopefully in the future we can speak again as we get updates in your progress.
Okay, sure. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time, Brad.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
Yeah, good checking.